Welcome to Beyond the Dragon, where we explore indie tabletop role-playing games and their design to inspire you to play them or take what you like for your own creations. Hi there, my name's Oscar C. Tango.
And my name is Sun.
We're both tabletop game designers and professional game masters who love TTRPGs. Today we will be discussing Westmarch's campaigns. Hello everyone and welcome to another unnamed design segment. Today, as mentioned, we will be discussing Westmarches. For those who are unaware, Westmarch's games are traditionally games made composed of a large number of players who will take on, I don't want to say random, but will not have a concrete set party and will take on quests with different groups of players, potentially at a number of different levels, to clear dungeons and go on adventures. It is one of the various ways to get a large group of players playing in the same game with the same set of characters at the same time, and has had an amount of popularity throughout the years, and is, to my knowledge, still one of the favored ways to play D&D, even in the modern era, as well as other tabletop games, and we're going to be discussing running those. Something we are both exceedingly underqualified to do, as neither of us has ever run one, which is part of why we're discussing this.
Indeed.
So, Sun, I don't want to necessarily say that you know more about this than me, but I do believe that you are, I think you might have more knowledge about this than me, because I think I learned about Westmarches from you. I was like, hey Sun, what's a Westmarches? And you were like, oh, it's this.
Yes. So, the Westmarches style was developed and publicized by Ben Robbins based on like a campaign that he ran of the same name. So, yeah, that's where it's derived from. But what Robbins classifies as the defining features to a Westmarches campaign are there was no regular time. Every session was scheduled by the players on the fly. So it was on the onus of the players to, organize a party and then tell the DM, the game master, okay, we want to play. So this was one of the because Ben wanted to play, but once it was time to organize a game, it was always like, oh, I'm busy. This was one of those things like, okay, if you want to play, you let me know when you want to play. That was one of the origins of the Westmarches. So that was one of the features. Number two, yes, there was no regular party. So each game generally had a different party dynamic, and it was drawn from a pool of here, 10 to 14, as what I'm reading it. And three, there was no regular plot. The players decide where to go and what to do. It was as sandbox of a game as you could get it. And to organize this sandbox, there was a central hub town. There was a safe space where all the players were when they weren't being played. They were in the tavern and all that stuff. So how Westmarches generally is you get your party, you decide on what quest you're doing, you go out into the wilderness, do as much as you can, and then you need to come back or finish whatever you're doing and return back to the hub town at the end of the session. And that is one of the major concessions that players have to make with this type of Westmarches. You must return back to town in some form at the end of the session, so we don't have random player characters stranded out in the world, and then those players can't play while these groups are now, playing in different areas and the like. And so, that's why you had this singular town. And that's generally how it worked. You had, in some form, a way to generate quests, be it rumors in the town, typical quest boards, and the like. And yeah, it was up to the players to decide, ooh, that quest sounds fun. Or that rumor sounds cool. Let's explore it more. We go out, and then they find some cool stuff. It might be way too difficult for them, So they come back and in whatever chat, Discord or the like, or email service, they tell, crap, that was way too difficult. There's a lich there. And then the players that have way, higher level characters are like, oh, a lich. Let me know when you want to go on that lich destroying venture. I'll come with you. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then they go do that. And, more rumors and quests get generated from those things. And it should be a thing that just a continuing growing game based on the sandbox. As a more, I guess, detailed explanation of it.
And you know what? Actually, I think with your example so far, you've touched upon one of the more interesting things about Westmarch's games is that they very frequently have groups with differently leveled characters potentially going on the same adventures, meaning that balancing them can be very wild.
Yeah. Like the thing is, like, generally, like, balance in a game sense is not really thought of. Like, sure, well, it is, but not in the sense of I need to make sure everything is balanced at the always. And you can get very gamist, in this sense. It's like, okay, here's my level 1 section, and here's all the level, where if people are going in here, they're safe, they can do those things. But if they go in terms of like dungeons or something, if they go deeper, or if they go deeper into this level 1 forest, then that's when they find a level, 10 area. Whoa. And then, then the players that go there were like, oh shit, let's return. There's a dangerous location there. We need to get some of our bigger friends on this thing. Or we'll leave it for now. Let's go somewhere else. But we always know we can come back here to explore.
Yes, very true. And it means that so Westmarches has had an influence on TTRPG design, because as I said, it is a somewhat popular style of play. It certainly has its it may not be necessarily the most common style of play, but I know at one point I heard that in a lot of the early online roleplay community, Westmarches was dominant in its style of play, like back in the days, potentially before Discord and Roll20. And you can see aspects of dungeon and game design discussion in some more recent RPGs mimicking that. Crowns, a game we reviewed in this set on the channel, I happen to know that the author of Crowns ran a Crowns Westmarches after the 1.0 release of the game.
And he's probably still running it, like their post.
Maybe. I can't get back into the Discord, so I don't know.
Yeah, but they were posting like seasons, like the story events to get people interested, and then decide what they want to follow and hooks and the like. Yeah.
But but you can clearly see with Crowns, one of the things Crowns is like, oh, like treasures are hidden, new ancient locks will change, so that you might have a reason to come back to a dungeon, because while you may have searched it and cleared it once, different things will happen because it's a very ancient place, and that speaks to me a bit about Westmarches, where a lower level party could be going in to clear and grab some leftover loot, and then accidentally open a very ancient lock and need a higher level player, or, to send in a higher level group to go and deal with something big and bad and scary inside. And it also goes and... Again, the aspect of Westmarches where different levels are more common does go into stuff like old 2nd edition D&D, where monsters could potentially drain levels, and having different leveled characters was significantly more common. Knave and other OSR games that request that you make a level 1 character after your character dies still show like this kind of mindset where very much balance is a myth. Dungeons can change and have very differently scaled sets of things for people to encounter, because it's impossible to fairly balance for a party that are all different levels, which is a little bit against certain modern expectations of RPGs where group or milestone XP is more common.
And then you can something that I'll definitely bring up later, but in a game like Five Torches Deep,
Mm.
with some of the procedures there, with like the travel roll and the like,
Mhm.
but more specifically the return roll,
Oh yeah, definitely.
where it's like, oh, we're in the middle of a dungeon, but we don't want to like stop here, but we kind of want to like tie loose ends up. So let's just wrap things up. Let's return. We'll do a couple of rolls and then figure out if we made it back safely. That would work perfectly for a West Marches campaign.
And now, do you know what game was being played for the original West Marches? Since you clearly know more about the history of West Marches than me.
No, I do not have it on me. No, but if I remember, it is highly like it was probably like D&D first or original,
Okay, yeah, and
potentially.
so that actually the idea of the return roll being so important might make sense for Five Torches, because one of the things Five Torches does explicitly state is it takes a lot of its inspiration from second edition.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
so the idea of a return roll might have been with potential West Marches play in mind.
Yeah. I do not have what it was running. No.
That's fine.
But I'll definitely in the description of this video, I'll definitely provide a link to the original blog post by Ben Robbins, so you can actually look over yourself. But one of the other things with West Marches is, like, I want to reiterate, it really puts the onus on the players, and West Marches will die if there are no motivated players. The players are choosing what quests they want to do. The players are organizing groups to then tell, in this case, I'm just going to assume a singular DM, a singular game master, that they want to play. The players, after playing, then make session reports of some kind, to either gain more experience or just to provide that information to the rest of the pool of players. Hey, there's a cool thing here that we either did, we got, or couldn't do, and now that can be a new game for later. It really needs motivated players.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I will say one of the other things is that while I doubt it would be impossible to do like personal character narratives, those would have to be handled in a slightly more play-by-post style, where like role play between people is whatever, but the moment a roll needs to happen, it needs to be moderated, because in a game like West Marches, it works very well not just because there's motivated players, but because any group can come together. It doesn't necessarily need to be, me, Grognar the Barbarian, and Uthrad the Cleric. It can be me, Vasily the Ranger, and, Tommy the Rogue, and I've never played with either of those two before, but we both know we all know that we have the skills necessary to potentially clear a dungeon, so it tends to lend itself more to a with a motivated player idea, a pickup style of game where it's like, hey, we want to run this dungeon, and it seems, now this might just be my own limited knowledge and experience, but it seems to me that a big personal story or meta plot might be very hard to do with that, because if you say put out a rumor that the syndicate that one player lost his family to is doing things and other players pick it up with the very style of this game, you can't go, hey, sorry, you guys can't go on this. This quest is for Johnny because his character has personal ties to this. So you do kind of need a group that's like, we're down here to go out, maybe, stuff like, like town projects and the like from, Into the Odd or Mouse Ritter, where people can invest money into things like that, will give people personal things to do in town, but in terms of the actual gameplay, it very much needs to be we're out here to kill a monster, clear a dungeon, or do research for, like, you have to have an external goal more often than not, or else deal with needing to exclude people somewhat potentially unnecessarily.
Yeah, like the stories that you will be exploring are going to be the events that you encounter on an individualistic level that could be then linked together overall. It's like, oh, we fought these cultists over here, and then I heard that you, like, a couple of weeks later fought potentially the same cultists in a different area. What were they doing over there? And like a larger like meta plot type of thing. Um, and then you yourself might fight these cultists again, or have interactions with them. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot harder to get those more personal um stories where it's the same group of players and the game master can really cater to each player. That's you don't look for that in this. That it would be way too difficult to try and give that to everyone. And yeah, so either trying to find those links, even just small links, when you're playing these larger, more sandbox encounters out, or when you are in town and you want to basically just do some free form role play with either the players that are just, you know, floating about in the chat room, and some NPCs and the like. Maybe the connections you're making besides the other player characters that you'll consistently be playing with are just the NPCs that you're, particular NPCs that you're completing quests for and the like.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like it's impossible to do somewhat personal narratives, like, oh, someone, oh, hey, your family farm is potentially under attack, and you can give a rumor to someone in the moment that they can hoard for themselves, and then build a group for. Sure, but that's one of those things where it's like, if someone can't find the players, they're stuck, and so yeah, no, you can't expect deep personal narratives, but they might happen.
And if anything, this is a great way to share those narratives. It's like, oh, I saw this really, I got a, I went into this dungeon and then a voice spoke to me about this cool, amazing relic somewhere in the deep jungle. I cannot traverse that jungle yet. Can you please, try and find the location? And then that group is like, yeah, no worries. That sounds cool. We'll go do that. And then they find the location where, they think that's where the relic is. It's like, hey, do you want to come along? The voice kind of spoke to you. It kind of makes sense that you could get that relic. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And, these small little things.
Yeah, and like very much capable of personal. But again, one of the other things with West Marches is the potential for, frankly, a large number of people to be involved that you may not know. So there need to be pre-established rules for making sure everything's above board. Because on the other hand, the group could be like, yeah, we'll find it for you. Haha, we have this map. We're going to steal the relic. And as exciting a story as that could be, it's not an exciting story if someone's getting really upset and that's not what they were trying to have happen, and it makes the game worse for somebody. That's just bullying, and at that point it's like, well... So, but no, like, on the other hand, if betrayal is above board and everyone's okay with it, that makes for a cool story. Which does bring me to one thing, beyond just the concept of, adventurers, with less D&D oriented and more skill oriented games, things like West Marches open up a possibility for just broader roleplay server ideas in general. Because with the West Marches style, you could have, a group of players playing, magical investigators, and they, keep the law in town amongst all these rowdy adventuring types. You could have map makers, explorers, and archaeologists who frequently need to hire rough and tumble mercenaries, and instead of having these be NPCs, have them be actual players with actual goals within the concept of the game. That can help keep the story motivated and lets it be even more player-driven, because it's one thing to say, oh, there's a rumor that kobolds have a statue that turns into a dragon, over in this lair 20 miles away from Adventure Town, versus you have a character who has been doing, research on things like kobolds and magical dragon artifacts because dragons mysteriously disappeared from the world 2 centuries ago, and then they hear about this group of kobolds and puts out a bounty, but also this, squishy researcher type is like, but I need to come along for my research.
Yeah. The player characters are one of the many avenues that these quests can come from. By, they themselves exploring the world in some manner. In this case, your way of them being more researchers, and they research in an area and then finding this information, and then like actively hiring out higher level characters.
Yeah.
Or more geared towards this situation characters. One thing I wanted to make mention of, in my eyes, while definitely if you can everyone get agree to it, I think West Marches is better if it's just completely cooperative and it's basically there's no idea of PvP or of that competitiveness.
No,
really.
that's
in
fair.
Friendly competitiveness of like, there's a parent, relic in that jungle. Let's try and get it. But yeah, I would stick away from getting closer to just PvP in general. Really.
I can see what you're saying, but I think there is one amount of overlap that we should discuss, which is why I brought up the potential for PvP and antagonistic stories to be, above board, which are stuff like play-by-post roleplay servers or LARPs. Because in terms of West Marches and, like large multiplayer LARPs or large play-by-post or like freeform roleplay servers, that kind of stuff does happen, and it could be argued that West Marches, while not derived from, are an extension of that style of play, so you may wind up in places with a similar idea to West Marches where PvP is above board, which is why, you're right, I would prefer purely cooperative, but if Betrayal is above... If some games expect a certain amount of scheming in Betrayal, where Betrayal has to be above board for the nature of the game, but it needs to be in a way where everyone is still having fun. No, like, I'm going to secretly stab you in the back.
So let's say we are preparing our own West Marches. For me specifically, it would be I am the sole game master facilitator of this world, and I would hope to aim for at least about a pool of 15 to 20-ish players. More, that's cool, but getting at least 3 player groups worth of people is probably what I'd aim for. What about you? Were you thinking of a single thing, or like you mentioned before, a multi GM experience or the like?
See, the thing is that, so coming at this from a anything I want perspective, I mean, a solo thing does sound like it would be doable in the numbers you're talking about. Coming at it from a realistic perspective, I think I fundamentally might need help. And there is also the thing, we're both coming at this, like, if we were going to run this, we are both, professional GMs, we get paid for our GMing. If I were going to do something as big as a West Marches, with the way that my, work schedule and life is now, it would basically need to become what I'm doing, like, all the time, where, yeah, I would probably need somewhere in the realm of, like, 20 players to make it really, like, I mean, I could probably get away with 15 and still be making similar to what I'm making now, but 20 players would be about what I need to make it worth it, and if it's players coming to me with things, it would be basically a very much a large roleplay server style where, you know, the roleplay, or a play-by-post style where the roleplay is free, but the moment a dice roll happens, it needs to be managed by a GM who will come in and be like, yep, that's kosher, this is the response, here's what goes down.
So, because you keep mentioning this, is interesting you're bringing up the concept of having roles when a game is not in play at the moment.
Well, because, you know, people might do things back at town, and, like, that's how they get their parties together, and people are going to... It is a role-playing game. People are going to do more than just roleplay in a dungeon, hypothetically. And with the modern era we have Discord chats where people can roleplay literally 24/7.
No, that is totally fair. How I'm seeing West Marches is to make things simple, and also to basically avoid the act of extra work, and making sure the town hub is more specifically for just where all your players are and where they can safely stay, and if they are getting quests in a different way, the quests or rumors are coming from that. It's just where they are, and if there is roleplay, it does not need a die.
Most
And so
roleplay
it's
doesn't
more-
need a die, but sometimes it might. The thing is, like, I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure if it's a realistic expectation with the modern nature of Discord servers.
No, that is fair. But yeah, I guess that's one of the areas that, in quotation marks, the game I would scrub a little bit and not worry about too much, and that'd be just more interaction at best.
Yeah,
That
and
I myself would not even need to look at.
no,
in a
that's
way.
fair, but it needs to. I mean, it needs to be moderated anyways, because what if someone's breaking server rules, and if people are going to be chatting in their out of character or in character chats, you know, potentially at all times of day, you might need to go back through logs and have people flag things. It fundamentally it needs to be moderated, and that's where my whole thing of, like, I need to be making, like, you know, basically 20 players is a lot of people to moderate. I'm not sure I could do 50 unless a bunch were kind of inactive, but if people are only going to be like, and you know, if people are just like, yeah, I'm down to go on this dungeon, I'm this level with this, like, thing that I have, you know, you can do that.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I guess I'm seeing it more of a not people aren't going to interact with, and it's a small enough cast that it's not just random strangers or anything. That's how, if I was running a West Marches, I would not be thinking it would be just a random forum where there's just a bunch of people.
I mean, if you were curating your list of players, then yeah, you might be able to do that a lot better. But coming at it from the perspective of a GM at all, like, I can't understand. Like, that's a fuckload of work to do. You have to prep a lot of potential, like, things that are going on, enemies and dungeons to have done. And I mean, you know, maybe if your dungeon is basically text-based with some rooms and, like, lines on a graph, and you don't have detailed maps, which are, you know, kind of a thing. But from what it sounds like in the original sense, like, the dungeon crawl obviously needs to have a GM there to be like, and then you come across 18 spiders, haha! And while that's going on, you have to, you know, that's uptime where the GM has to be doing something, and it can't necessarily just be written lines and graphs, and you might need, especially in more modern styles of play, proper, like, dungeon charts, because let's be real here, outside of some professionally published products, the quality of maps has gone up over the years as digital tools making dungeon maps easier and easier. You know, people people have maybe, I don't want to say expect because I don't want to speak for the broader public, but it's people maybe more accustomed to maps that are detailed and look, very nice and good rather than just here are some boxes with some like written things about them on a piece of paper. In this
Fair
dungeon,
enough.
and Theater of the Mind is, well, not a dying art, not necessarily the most common part of combat these days.
Fair enough. If I was to run a West Marches, I would make it easy on myself and I would run as close as I could to simple Theater of the Mind. And if combat was involved where we need a little bit more, it is gonna be a black and white. Maybe I literally drew it up a couple seconds ago type of thing, because in this type of scenario, it should be easier on me because the players are deciding what they're going to do.
Yeah. No, and
As
that's
a
very
West
true.
Marches, I probably
But like you still have they're like, even if your battle maps are drawn up like within minutes or like live on Roll20 with the draw tool, which I used to do back when I first started out, even if you are doing that, which is fine, and I'm not here to disparage it, I am simply discussing the potential expectations of players walking into this sort of situation.
Oh yeah, but at that point, set the expectations. Hey, I'm providing you in some aspect, a living, breathing world. You ain't getting high def maps.
No, and that's fine, but even just the living world, that's a lot of work. That's what I'm trying to say. Like even if you're doing the most simplified style of combat and dungeon design, it's still a lot of work to get something like this up and running, and planning a small scale like one shot can take a lot of time and effort.
Well, why don't we get into how we would run a West Marches, since we are dancing around that?
Yeah, no, and that's I was going to say, like, I think at that point we need to talk more specifically about how we kind of had broached the subject. I mean, you say danced around it, but you were talking about like, oh, well, I would do this.
Let's get straight into the almost dot points of how you would do it. Why don't you go first?
So the thing on my end is that obviously the things I say on this show tend to reflect my opinions, because I don't do a great job of playing the devil's advocate unless I am extremely bored. But anyways, so I would very much like a game where you don't necessarily... I could totally get, like, okay, I'm gonna cook up, like, 20 or 30 dungeons, and, and the dungeons can expand and change and grow and shrink with whack shit that I'll have on, like, a dice pool using, like, Crowns' map generation, perhaps. But I would very much like a game where you don't just have to be a dungeon delving adventurer to participate in the game, which is part of where a lot of my discussions are happening, where it's like, oh, having an archaeologist to open doors could be helpful, or having a medic who doesn't have any combat abilities to heal people is important, and those kinds of older school, you really need to have like a specialist along with you to handle certain special challenges is important style of game. Because I admit to liking those kinds of things. And, it's why I like skill-based games more than class-based games, because it lets you build a character with a skill set rather than being told what you're allowed to do and choosing to engage with that skill set by a pre-written list.
In these specialized characters, because of their specialization, it would mean they focus in a certain thing and they wouldn't be great in other things.
Yeah.
But maybe this player wants to play a lot more. One solution could be for them to make a secondary or tertiary character.
Absolutely.
Would you be open to them each player having a collection of characters?
Oh no, absolutely. I would be fine with that, because the thing is, assuming that the sheet adjustments are, kosher and people aren't cheating, it doesn't really, them having a second character doesn't bother me, as long as as long as someone's not like, I'm going to go on this adventure solo, solo with my cast of characters.
Mm,
Because
yeah,
while I'm
yeah,
not opposed to a player at the table playing one or maybe two characters, to quote second edition of Apocalypse World Engine, yeah, because playing two characters is so hard, isn't it, Ref? After all, you're playing how many NPCs right now while keeping the world running?
yeah.
Fucking, I love that line. I quote it to people all the time whenever they're like, I don't know about playing two characters, and I'm like, yeah, because it's so fucking hard. Love that. But no, I wouldn't mind that idea. But one of the things is, so one of my biases is I will admit to being a more exploration focused character or player in terms of games. Like, I'm very familiar with combat mechanics because I started off playing almost exclusively combat style games. But I definitely prefer to take on more of the map-making researcher role than I would say the face or anything like that. So like a scientist in a sci-fi game. Or the explorer and like trap disarmer in a more fantasy-style game. Or, the occultist in more modern fantasy types of games. Where it's very much about my character exploring, learning, and discovering, rather than going places and fighting things. And because of that, if I would want to run a West Marches game that allows players to have that and, discover things in the world and go searching for secrets and finding out, strange things with a party of, rugged adventurers that they hired who are themselves, other players in the game. That does feel like a fun, breathing world. But I also acknowledge that that's why I'm like, oh, well, you have to have, like, downtime stuff where it's like, oh, hey, researchers are brought things and allowed to level up by doing research, and they might go on dungeons, but that doesn't have to be, like, their necessarily whole or main mode of play. And one of the other reasons why it'd be like, oh, yeah, like, maybe a second GM or, like, a multi-GM situation for me, personally.
Yeah, like just immediately what you're saying to me definitely is making it more difficult with having a secondary way of playing for those particular characters and a different progression system for those characters. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's it's a cooler story when it's a much cooler story to say John, the guy who is playing our hacker, decided to go ahead and during downtime found out the secret of the conspiracy to turn all Jimmy John's sandwich shops into car repair places. Then we brought this information to Timmy the NPC. And next session, Timmy the NPC had this big secret for us because, the player John being a part of it and coming along, and it being another actual person, brings in a level of personal experience to every aspect of it where it's like this isn't necessarily planned, it's our story that we're unfolding. Sure, the GM set up the stuff for it, but we picked it up and other people along with us joined and ran with it.
Hmm.
And that's why I want to cater to that, because if you're doing West Marches, you have the opportunity to have a lot of players and have more naturally occurring stories and emergent gameplay, and so I would be inclined to try and cater to that with the strength of having player characters who don't just need to be another group of mercenaries looking for coin and monsters to fight. But I could also do there are ways that you could do hypothetical mega dungeons and turn them into West Marches games, where, you just cook up, however many rooms and dungeon things for people to go in and out of and clear the way as they go and try to, say, restore a lost dwarven hold by clearing out the mega dungeon beneath it or something. And I could, that would still be a fun and exciting game where if people are, adventurers and mercenaries, it's just... I feel like there is missing potential in limiting yourself to that, and I clearly have no self-control, so...
Yeah, like for me, with what you're saying there is, especially in this constraints of a West Marches, where the GM, you should be only putting in as much effort as, obviously you do some prior prep, but once the players decide, yes, we do this, is all that like the wanting finding this stuff out. I would figure out a way to make sure that stuff is found out when you are out from the town. Now that's how I see the constraints of West Marches working. If you want to do something, you have done it outside the town.
No, and that's
part of
that's true. But one of the things is that the sandbox nature of a West Marches game is a lot open to interpretation.
Oh no, yeah, there's different ways of doing it.
And yeah, because like a sandbox, you have to have a sandbox. I mean, you say doing no more prep than necessary, and of all the people on this podcast, I think you should know that I'm the guy who doesn't prep in like the back half of an adventure until the day before, and will make up new plot points on the fly as I just am like, oh, you know what, this sounds interesting. I'm just gonna chuck this at some people. One of my players once thanked me for planning, and I cried laughing for 20 minutes because I had planned it in the shower the day we had run that adventure, and then gone and executed it, making it up as I went along. And I was like, I'm really glad you think I planned that. It makes me feel like I do a good job at this whole fucking paid GMing thing. But you have to have a sandbox to some extent pre-planned out. Like, of course, it can adapt and change, and you can add in new things with varying levels of planning. But like, a sandbox needs to be planned out before you start running it to a point. And what that point is varies on the scale that you are able and willing to get with the people that you have. But that's the thing, is it needs to be up to that point of scale. That you can run multiple things, potentially. One event does not a sandbox make, so you have to have 3 or 4 at least, anyways.
No, that is totally fair. I would do 2 straight away, just 2 start off the bat. It's like, hey, one of these 2, and then that one thing will, in some manner, make the players decide if there's 1, 2, 3, or 4 things that spark off where they're just like, I wonder where these people are hanging out, or oh, there's that cool thing in there type of thing. What? Okay, let me.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of just went off there. Please tell us what you would do with your West Marches, because I don't shut up.
Oh, no, I was actually trying to see what else we can break down with your potential West Marches. Something that we talked many moons ago was the concept of multiple hubs.
Yes. That was for a multi-GM thing, where each GM would be in charge of a hub.
Okay,
I remember I was playing Deep Rock Galactic at the time. I'm like 60% sure.
Okay, yeah, it probably was. Yeah, and if it was multiple GMs, then sure. But that, I immediately am discounting any sense of multi-GMing with the West Marches.
That automatically makes it a lot harder. The reason why I had thought that, I remember a lot of the conversation. I'm like physically having. So, fun podcast fact. This podcast was started because I was playing Deep Rock Galactic and Elden Ring on and off, and talking to Sun about game design, and I said, it would be really fun to start a podcast where we do this for more indie games and the like, and he said, I don't know, maybe, and then I bullied him into it.
Yeah, yes. I had a lot of things going, and yeah, I just got bullied.
But anyways, that aside, no. So I am remembering this. So one of the reasons why I said a multi-point of light was because if you're okay. Further context, I currently do, and Sun also was at one point a part of a multi-Pro GM server where, we don't necessarily run things together, but we all are kind of there to pool like a group of players who might be interested in running things with us. as well as advertising and contacts. So if someone meets someone and is like, hey, like all these other people have access to the same thing too. Anyways, so at the time I was thinking a lot about cooperative GMing, and so one of the things is the idea of hearing, one of the main focuses of West Marches is a concept called Points of Light, where there are major focus areas, such as, your city, and then other points of light would be the dungeons that you go into where, they are basically focus points.
Points of light specifically, when I was discussing it, these are points of safety amongst the darkness, the dangerous darkness
yes.
of the world.
Right. But they, in general, like, there are focus points and then points of safety, and so one of the things about points of light is it implies multiple. So I was wondering about the idea of having multiple points of lights where, one where you can hear about, say, you're in City A and you hear about good old City T and their group of heroes who recently fought off an undead invasion, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And in this kind of stuff, setting-wise, travel is normally exceedingly difficult. There's not a lot of way to get from A to T unless there's like a portal or a spell that would be near world-changing, because in Points of Light, the power scale available to players does tend to be lower, if I'm correct, son?
Yeah, and generally. Generally.
So one of the things that I had thought was running multiple Points of Light, where a GM basically runs a point of light. And I was thinking about multi-GM at the time because, that way you don't have because if you're talking about multiple points of light, you very quickly start to talk about a concept of multi West Marches at once.
That just sounds way too complicated.
Well, no, exactly. For one person, that's bullshit. Because if you think about it, if Points of Light have difficult travel between them, and, it would take, like, let's say months to travel the wilderness in between City A and T, and they're, like, 5 miles apart because it's just that bad these days, it starts to look like, oh man, that's, really crazy. We aren't ever really going to be able to get there. So then the dungeons and the opportunities and the plot lines in the city and anything that's happening are almost completely isolated due to the fact that these are, isolated points of light. So it would be easier to have one guy be like, oh, in this city I'm running it, or, in this West Marches, if you come over to City T, you get the Undead Army plotline and the Undead Rising as this city suffers under an undead attack, and if other people come in, they know to expect lots of undead-related plot lines, although there will be other things, potentially. Whereas in City A, you have the, the missing dragons plot line and trying to discover why dragons left and how that caused the world to get all messed up. And then in City C, you have the, the ancient vampire king rising up again, and that sounds like a lot to manage at once for one GM, so you get a couple.
So something I want to make mention is, one thing that is generally encouraged and works well is the idea of managing time, and time is important. And one of the things is an old D&D rule is time outside of the game equals to time in the in-game world. So when you're not playing and it's been a week since you've played, a week has passed. And while I'm not saying you should definitely do that, I think that would be a cool thing to have with West Marches. But besides the point, with these multi-GM, multi-West March concept that you're coming up with, I feel like getting people all on the same page in terms of just a simple timescale would be very, very wonky, especially when people are like, I want to go to that place now. Oh, it's going to take me months, so that means I just can't play this character because, they have to wait, some kind of indeterminate amount of time to get to that other GM's table of West March play.
No, that's
that
true.
Sounds a little weird.
No,
Yeah.
that does. Well, I mean, I will say I didn't know about that first part, although it does kind of make sense. I mean, I do get what you're saying, but I mean, there are, things like that, like opening up a portal network would be a pretty, like, world-changing thing that could happen conceivably in a sandbox-style West Marches game.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to get to with the concept of multi-hubs, where it's like, okay, we have this save point, and players come and go from this singular save point. And with West Marches, you are inherently going to be exploring that. That's the part of the game. You are going to be exploring out into the dangerous wilds of some kind. And the further out you explore, especially if you are continuing to go wide instead of like stay small and like really delve deep and look under every rock, it's going to get probably more dangerous, or at least more tiresome as you continue going out. So the players might decide, or you just throw out, there's some cool like destroyed settlements or the like. The players might go, hey, why don't we make a safe point of some kind, a second hub? And that in themselves can be its own quest on like trying to build this up. But how I would make that work with just a single DM thing is like, okay, if you want another hub, what this will achieve when it's made is basically you can any player in this West Marches table can decide to start from that hub and vice versa, no matter what, if they're not playing. And it just allows you to now, from that new hub, explore, and the travel roles or how you travel is easier or the like. And how I would make that make sense in the game is either a teleport circle, a train network. The road that you made between it is really, really safe and, somewhat fast or the like. And obviously, depending on how you want to do the transport, maybe the distance isn't, that far that it's fine to do a little bit of a quick jump. But yeah, I would probably just go teleport circles if you wanted to do the concept of multi-hubs. But it'd act like a singular hub anyway, just because of the instant transport.
That's fair. No, that's fair. But no, and see the thing about like, oh, going and starting our own hub is like one of those things where it's like, just I mean, in any Points of Light campaign, that's clearly like a thing that could happen and would be hugely beneficial. But like that sounds exciting. It quickly explains to me the appeal of West Marches is that me and a group of 20 other random adventurers can gear up, walk out into the wild, pick a spot that looks reasonably clear, and go ahead and, make that spot our base and have an effect on the world because we've created a new point of light.
Yeah. But in terms of game mechanics, you've just made a new starting point that allows further travel to be easier, or immediate access to closer points. And sure, with factions, maybe more interaction with factions in that area that your points of light started. But another thing I want to make mention, it's best that, because the idea of trying to make sure that the adventure is outside the hub, these safe points are safe points. Your hubs are not going to get sieged of some kind or anything of that, because organizing those things with Mesa is a bother, and it's much easier to not even consider that fact. But did you have anything to say on that before I move on?
No, I think at this point we should really go into what you would run because I fucking went off on my whole thing so far.
No, that's fine. We were able to get some conversations on that.
Yeah, but we've also been going for an hour of nearly of my idea.
No, that's fine. One of the concepts I would do is probably, so I would immediately use a nice simple game system, probably a mouse reader into the odd basis, or I would use like a Lumen / Light game. But the more fictional setup would probably be you are some kind of people coming from a vault or some kind of stasis emerging out into your old homeland that has been drastically changed. You know, you escaped catastrophe when the roaming titans or gods or whatever were starting to clash. So you went into, you know, your safety dungeon and then woke up, you know, 100 years later or the like. So this map would be mostly blank, but there's some spots where it's like, oh yeah, we used to have a town there, so that's a point. Some things to go towards if you want at the start of the game. And so yeah, like a rediscovery exploration game. But no, definitely, I would utilize the five torches return roll.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would lean into multi hubs, just being, you know, new save points you can start from to expand your exploration, and go with the teleport circles with that. I would be using factions like the ones probably in Mass Ritter, that faction system where there's just a couple groups out there that are doing things, and you know, I'll just roll for them every out of game. Well, actually, it'd be in game week as well, because I would be doing real time progression. When we're not playing, time is progressing in the world. And so that just allows factions that I'll probably do a faction roll every 2 weeks or so on have they got this new thing. I would lean into the Metroidvania-esque-ness of, you know, some things won't be accessible right now, or they're a lot harder, or, you know, more lethal to attempt. You know, the gated jail door with the shiny at the other end. It's there. You can try and get in now if you can, but you know, you might want to come back for it. And rumor tables. That, you know, start small, and once that's been looked at, scratch it out and put something new in there. But it would definitely be a lot more procedurally generated, and you know, I'm gonna relax. I'm not gonna put too much into it. It's just gonna be random tables.
You know what is occurring to me? I think I know part of the reason why you and I have such different ideas on what we would run for West Marches.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about all these random tables, and all I can think is what a fucking pain to set up. But I'm talking about like setting up this game where like people can do things out of character and would probably have to use the time scale as well. You know, for like research and like things like that. And I'm thinking, oh, that would be fun because that wouldn't necessarily have to happen on a battle map. And sure, I might need to check some things, but you know, like later, and like have a bunch of tabs open in the server. But like that would mostly be reading and me answering questions through text, which for me is much more relaxing and less time consuming. And it occurs to me that this is just a difference in personality about how we prefer to run our games.
Like, and also a lot of the random tables that I'd be pulling from, half of them would probably not even be made by me.
No, fair enough.
But
you'd still make half your tables? That's too many.
Oh, yeah, well, those ones would be more like, here's my factions. You're going to encounter these things in this region. You know, I want to make sure those are region-specific encounters. But yeah. And, of course, it's going to be in a crater valley, a circular type of crater valley. So you're all stuck in this mega bowl.
What is it with you and the circular craters, son? When am I going to get you to run a game with a square crater in it?
Well, I guess I could sharpen those edges.
Yeah, that's right. Also, run another game for me after all these years.
Yes. But no, yeah. Yeah, we definitely have differing styles
Yeah.
based on the concept of West Marches. I would do like travel roles to allow the journey to be emphasized a bit, but only if it comes up, stop and play that out, because that play bit might, ooh, new stuff that we can do next
Yeah.
game or whatever. But you've already decided we're going to go do this. We're going to this adventure site using a mass reader term.
Yeah, and
So,
no, and I can think of a number of games that I've read where like hearing you talk about this is like, oh, there is clear West March's influence. Crowns and Mouse Ritter are two obvious ones, but also what I've read of Forbidden Lands, like and their adventure sites, kind of reminds me of stuff like this.
yeah, and
In theory, massive aspects of Balaskir was inspired by that kind of like adventure site rumor mill design.
exactly. So yeah, definitely procedurally generated in a video game esque term.
Yeah, and I mean, it does sound. I'm realizing also that a large portion of my thoughts are also inspired by, to an extent, play-by-post style games where it's just like using a cross between like the play when you want to and are able of play-by-post, which clearly there's an aspect of that in the origin of West Marches
Okay.
of you people can't pick a time, just come to me when you have an idea, I'll run it.
Yeah, like I would be, sure, people can chat and all that stuff, but we are playing when you have formed a
Yeah.
group and we are playing, quote unquote at the table. But
No,
beyond that,
yeah, and I'm
you can
definitely
chat in character if you
hybridizing.
want.
I'm definitely hybridizing those two concepts, and that's why I'm coming up with my whole thing because it's like, no, it's a play-by-post, and then the dungeon is the West Marches bit. Now that I think about it, but
Okay, yeah.
part of the reason I'm saying this is because it's like there's clearly so many areas of reference to draw from in West Marches because, goddamn, like the concept is mostly just what do players want to do and when are they available, and there are so many different things that cater to that across so many books. It's a good reason to be well read in the RPG community,
Hmm.
or just watch our
Yeah, no.
podcast.
But yeah, there's different, definitely different ways you can go about West Marches. Here we've just explained two examples.
There
So
are others.
they're not the only two examples, and yeah, or you can see some of the influences in either one of those. And yeah, no, there's singular game master, West Marches. There's multi. There's the play by post, the living world forums things where you've got the moderators of this server, and then they GMs have qualified to become a game master in this world full of lore and all that, and they all have their own little area, or they've prepared this one shot or what, and it's like being deemed okay because it won't like break rules or really like screw up the world in some way because they've launched a nuke or whatever. There's different ways of playing in a living world type of thing. Um, Something that I'm not familiar with, but I've seen the acronym thrown around in the Star Playing Games Discord. MUDS, MUDS, which I believe is like basically a text-based MMO, basically a play-by-post MMO in forums.
You spend
So
more
yeah,
time on the SPG Discord than I do. I pretty much stick to Warlock Sanctum.
But yeah, so there's definitely different ways of playing a living world game. But yeah, West Marches, it's just about, hey, I'm happy to run games, but at this point, it's up to you players when we want to play. We got a shared world. I have this one setting that we can play in, and fuck it, it's up to you. I'm not doing any more effort than I need to.
Yeah,
That's how I see it.
No, and I mean that's fair, and I very much wouldn't do it, but like you got to prep your sandbox to an extent so that people can be like, oh, I'm interested in this because I'm doing a world trotting campaign, or well, continent actually in this case, campaign at the moment, and like it had West March's concept of points of, well, instead of points of light, I'd say points of darkness, where it's like here are some places of conflict, and my players are traipsing around a couple of the bigger ones at the moment. They went from one to another, like in rapid succession, kind of hilariously.
Hmm.
That Chimera fight is going to disappoint them when they finally fucking get to it. The whole thing that they left town to do was like hunt one monster, and they're like, we'll just keep wandering. Fuck returning to the hub. And they're just traveling the world now.
Yeah, and yeah, no, that's one of the things that you have to get used to, the concept of we return back to the hub. In a way, no, not in a way. West Marches are tied together one shots.
Yeah.
That's all it is. If you want to simplify it down to its core, it's just one shots in a shared world.
Or, well,
With-
one dungeon's in a shared world.
Yeah, but well, same thing. You're just playing a singular game that you end with, more than your standard group of players that might rotate. Sure, you might go back to the same dungeon, but you're still doing a one-shot type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think we got a good amount in there, and I was able to talk more based off your explanation, your idea. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
My thing has mostly been responsive. I think any like pre-existing ideas I have out there, it would just be like, I mean, there's the obvious fact that West Marches has the challenges, the same challenges as anything with a large group of players, even if you aren't running for them all at once, because you have to manage that many players anyways. I mean, I think from a paid jamming perspective, you would need to do it as a subscription, like a weekly subscription, where it's like, look, you can come to me anytime, and it would have to be what you're doing, and it would have to be, profitable to a certain extent.
And I guess this is where I would slightly differ, because let's talk about SPG and how we would run it. I've seen some GMs on Start Playing run West Marches, or run Living World, or whatever they're going to title it. But how they do it is they just have a certain couple slots that they run each week that you can just join up in, and obviously you will then eventually join their Discord, and then you'll just be there in the Discord, and if you want to play, join that one of those 4 sessions a week type of thing. And maybe the GM, you can gather a group and say, hey GM, are you free another time that week? But this is a more scheduled way of doing your West Marches.
See,
It's like, I will be running these times a week. Join if you want.
there's something new where instead of, in terms of West Marches, instead of player, because, we all have limited time, paid or not, having like, I will run it these times a week, come to me if you want to do, this thing. And I could see that. Yeah. There you go. See, there we go. That was something it was good to bring up, because I didn't even know that that was a thing that people were doing on SPG.
No, yeah. I saw that a couple of times, which made me go, oh, okay. If I was to do a West Marches, which I would like to do, this is how I do it. It's a blending of the two, where it's like I'm allotting these time slots to the West Marches. It's up to people to then join it, and obviously there would have to be some discussion prior or at the start of the session. It's like, okay, what are you doing? What hook are you jumping on? Obviously, if you were part of that Discord, that could be discussed prior to. It's like, oh, everyone that wants to do this hook, let's jump into slot 2 this week or something.
Yeah.
But
Seems like a bit of a game.
to me,
though.
it wouldn't be a subscription. It'd be just a standard start playing game thing.
Well,
Join
true.
the session, and then you've paid for it. Yeah.
To be fair, on my end, I mean, from what I've discussed, I would clearly be pulling from the play-by-post, but that way isn't. The main worry for me about that, and this is much more on a paid GMing side, is that like it seems like if people aren't interested in showing up, you have these open slots a week that you could be filling with more regular paying campaigns, hypothetically. But
and that is in terms of a paid GM standpoint. Yes, that is your own thing, and it's up to you whether you think you can suffice using up that time for potential Westmarch slots.
Yeah,
I'm glad we brought that point up, since we are both in this market. Beyond that, I think we got a nice laydown of Westmarches and how-to examples, and a little bit on the professional GMing side of how we might do it as well. Beyond that, I don't think we have anything else to discuss. And if need be, that'd probably be a more detailed, somewhat part 2.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Fuck it, if we ever have more to discuss, we can always come back and be like, hey, now with some real world experience, let's discuss what the hell happened.
Yeah. Like, I'll throw it out there. One of the Lumen games that I'm developing, I could see running it in a open table, kind of Westmarches way, where it's a group of players, and basically you're in this town, and there's a mega dungeon underneath you, and you just go in each session, maybe multiple times a session. And I don't see any reason why that needs to be the same group of players. And I think it'd be fun to have multiple groups of players just basically fucking about and getting progressing through the mega dungeon and helping build up the town and getting more upgrades and the like.
Yep. Then on my end, if I were gonna say a game, if I were doing fantasy, although I could just as easily, honestly just do it for sci-fi. I might be inclined to. I mean, Eclipse Phase comes to mind because I'm running 2 campaigns of that at once. So like my brain is just full of sweet Nova crabs stabbing me in the ear. But that aside, you could do something with that, especially with gate crashing and the way that works and how whack that is. But also, I think Grimblade would not be an unreasonable hack to or an unreasonable game to hack and chuck at a Westmarches concept.
And like you just talking about sci-fi, one of the first things that not one of the first things, but one of the early things I was considering on Start Playing Games, since the first game I ever ran on Start Playing Games was Light, the Lumen progenitor. That's like a Destiny-inspired game.
Now Lumen compatible with the Beacon edition, from what I remember, unless Spencer changed his mind.
It's still its own thing. But the campaign that came with Light is basically there's threats
yes,
attacking our solar system,
the back end of the second DLC.
Yeah, and I was going to run it kind of like a Westmarches with that. It's like, okay, we've got a shared pool of players, and you're each going on a mission to hopefully, protect this planet, protect that planet, lower the danger of this planet before eventually, you have the finale.
That would go well with a Westmarches game.
And in a light sense, I could definitely see in some chaotic but fun way doing in an MMO sense, a raid. Get as many people as you can for this one session.
That's not how I would run that, but that does seem like a fun idea. If I were going to do a raid, I would do a multi-mission thing where Like the collective success of the groups determines the success of the quote-unquote raid.
Hmm. A little bit of a detraction, but I saw someone did a raid type game which had about 50 or so people in this one video voice call or whatever, and they did a raid boss session, and there was like groups of people that organized like collective groups. It's like I'm the raid, I'm group A leader and all that stuff, and somehow it worked, and it was like it might have been an 8-hour session or something, but
Damn.
apparently it worked really well.
Man, I
Sounds
haven't
crazy.
played in a 6-hour session since I first started playing D&D.
Hmm.
I don't miss them. They were long.
But I think we are moving on into different topics, so why don't we wrap this up?
Yeah, at this point we're just getting really experimental with the concept of a lot of players, which is West Marches is more than just a lot of people, as we've clearly shown. In fact, West Marches is specifically players coming to you with what they want to do, and so you have a wide pool so that people can hopefully get a group. Large players are almost more of a West Marches comes from a symptom of scheduling issues, and the large player group is a part of the solution that West Marches brings. Not because West Marches requires a lot of people, but because players coming to you when they're available, it helps to have more people to draw from for various time frames.
Yeah, and you can just look at it as a solution to that problem, and you can play around with that solution as much as you want. There's no hard and fast rules. West Marches was just an experiment. Fuck
Right.
around with it.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean,
If that's everything,
Yeah.
I certainly don't have anything else. Thank you. All right, yeah. Then thank you for joining us today as we discussed West Marches games. Join us next time for more indie tabletop discussion and design. I've been Oscar C. Tango, and joining me has been Sun Gone.
You can find me at SunGone _ on Twitter, and at SunGone_ or at SunGone on many other different social platforms. Sun on Start Playing Games, and SunGone on itch.io.
And you can find me at Stranded TTRPG on Twitter and Hive. You can find me at Oscar C. Tango on SPG and Stranded Publishing on itch.io. And you can find all of those links in the description. And remember, don't be afraid to adventure beyond the dragon.